village of empty graves. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf, and the patter of rain against the dense canopy. Zubair trudged along the winding dirt road, his boots caked with mud. The storm had come suddenly, darkening the sky and making the forest an ominous maze. His passion for photography had led him here, chasing rumors of an untouched natural paradise. But now, drenched and exhausted, Zubair realized he needed shelter. The forest felt too vast, too empty, as though it were hiding something. His camera bag bounced against his back with every step, a reminder of the dream that had brought him this far. Through the downpour, he spotted a crooked wooden sign at the edge of the road. Its peeling paint barely revealed the words, Kohistan Village. Beneath it, an arrow pointed to a narrow, overgrown trail. Desperation overrode caution, and Zubair followed the path, his curiosity whispering promises of discovery. The trail led Zubair to a clearing where the village emerged like a forgotten relic. The houses were skeletal, their wooden beams warped by time and weather. Roofs sagged, windows gaped like hollow eyes, and doors swayed on rusty hinges. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of wood and the relentless whisper of the rain. Zubair felt a shiver run down his spine. This place was wrong, yet the allure of its mystery pulled him deeper. He adjusted the strap of his camera bag and ventured further. He knocked on a door, then another, but no one answered. His footsteps echoed in the empty streets, and he began to notice strange details. Symbols carved into doorframes, shriveled wreaths of dried herbs hanging from windows, and crude talismans made of bone and twine. At the village center, Zubair found a graveyard surrounded by a crumbling stone wall. The graves were in disarray, the earth disturbed as though something had crawled out. A chill swept through him, and he backed away, his instincts urging him to leave. But a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow darting between the tombstones. Zubair's heart pounded as he followed the shadow to a small hut at the edge of the graveyard. He hesitated, then knocked. The door opened a crack, and an old woman peered out. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here," she said, clutching the door as if to keep something out. "I need shelter," Zubair pleaded. "Please, I just need to stay for the night." "No one stays here, not after dark. What happened to this village?" The woman's gaze flicked to the graveyard, then back to Zubair. "Leave while you can," she said, and slammed the door shut. Zubair stood there, drenched and bewildered. He glanced at the graveyard again and saw another shadow flit between the trees. Drawn by a mix of dread and curiosity, Zubair entered the graveyard. The air grew colder, and the rain seemed to hush as he approached the open graves. He crouched beside one, his flashlight illuminating the damp soil. It was empty. No coffin, no bones, nothing. "What's going on here?" he muttered. A sudden noise made him spin around. A man stood at the edge of the graveyard, his face pale and eyes darting nervously. "Hey!" Zubair called. "Do you live here?" The man shook his head violently and backed away. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered before disappearing into the shadows. Zubair felt a growing unease. He wanted answers, but the village seemed intent on keeping its secrets. Zubair found refuge in an abandoned hut. It was barely standing, but it offered shelter from the storm. The interior was sparse, a broken cot, a few rusted utensils, and a shattered mirror. He set up his camera on the cot, hoping to capture something extraordinary in this eerie place. As night fell, the silence became oppressive. Zubair tried to sleep, but a faint whisper reached his ears. "Zubair, Zubair." His eyes flew open. Someone had called his name. He grabbed his flashlight and rushed to the window, but the streets were empty. Then he saw them, shadowy figures gliding through the village. Their movements were unnatural, their forms hazy and indistinct. Zubair's hands trembled as he clicked a picture. The flash lit up the room, but when he looked at the camera's screen, the shadows were nowhere to be seen. The next morning, Zubair found an old man sitting on the steps of a decrepit mansion. The man seemed lost in thought, his eyes fixed on the graveyard. Zubair approached him cautiously. "Sir, can you tell me what happened here?" The old man sighed heavily. "This village is cursed," he said. "Long ago, the villagers burned a woman alive, accusing her of witchcraft. She cursed us with her dying breath. The dead cannot rest, and the living, we are but shadows of ourselves." "Why did they accuse her?" "She was a healer," the man said, his voice trembling. "But when crops failed and sickness spread, they blamed her. Fear makes monsters of men." Zubair felt a surge of anger at the injustice. How can the curse be broken? The woman's grave lies on the mountain. If her soul is freed, perhaps the village can find peace. Zubair rallied a few villagers who still had courage left. Together they climbed the mountain, the path treacherous and overgrown. The storm had subsided, but the air was thick with tension. At the summit they found a lone grave marked by a weathered stone. The name Safia was barely legible. Zubair knelt before the grave. "Safia," he said, his voice steady, "we know you were wronged. Please forgive this village and find peace." As the villagers joined him in prayer, the wind howled and the ground shook. The shadows from the village appeared, circling the grave. Their whispers grew louder, a cacophony of sorrow and anger. The storm reached its peak, and a blinding light engulfed the grave. When it faded, the shadows were gone. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifted. Back in the village, the graves were no longer empty. The talismans had disintegrated, and the houses seemed less haunted. Zubair knew he had witnessed something extraordinary. As he prepared to leave, the old woman from the hut approached him. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You have given us a second chance." Zubair returned to the city with photographs unlike any he had ever taken. The village of empty graves was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to redemption. Years later, whenever Zubair looked at those photos, he felt a deep connection to that cursed village and the shadows that had found peace at last. The end.